Welcome back to the Race Report podcast, everyone. This is episode 3, and we are just a couple weeks away from the season kicking off, but the news has not stopped rolling. So in this episode, we will be talking about Team Andretti potentially joining the F1 grid, the Alfa Romeo livery launch, which just happened. We're continuing to talk about pre-season testing and the thoughts and feelings coming out of that, as well as current news and events regarding Max Verstappen's new contract, Haas dropping Uralkali and Mazepin and who will replace them, as well as the Russian races being cancelled going forwards. So, let's get stuck straight in. Let's start off with the topic that everybody, I'm sure, is aware of, is that pre-season testing has just finished the first test, but we're still seeing a lot of analysis and reviews coming out of that first pre-season test. Do be sure to go check out my review if you do want to see my thoughts on the whole process, but let's do a quick recap of how things went. In my mind, Ferrari definitely had the strongest showing at the test. They were very fast, very reliable, and top of the lap count. Obviously, their old caveats always apply to the pre-season tests, that the time screens don't really matter all that much because we don't know what weight the cars are at, we don't know what fuel the teams are carrying, we don't know what setups they're going for. So it's not a one-for-one comparison. Plus, some teams just like to sandbag, and that is when they don't reveal their full speed to the other teams. So, we don't really know based on the timesheets, but we can glean from how cars are running. Are they reliable? How many laps did they do? Were they consistent? And Ferrari definitely were all three of those for me. Plus, it just looked like a beautiful car, honestly. So that was really good to see. Both drivers had a good outing as well. Behind the scenes, they have been playing down their chances. But I think that's natural. You want to set expectations as low as possible, especially against the other teams, maybe lull them into some complacency, right? So you want to set expectations nice and low so that when you come out the traps fast, everyone's taken by surprise, right? One of the curious things about Ferrari that had come up is their engine for this year. Obviously, teams can design and repackage engines as they see fit, all the way up to the first race of the season, at which point they will be frozen. So it's very important that teams, if they are going to repackage their engine, do so, test it a lot, and get it locked in before that first race. Ferrari were one of those teams that were focusing on this quite a bit. They felt like their engine was one of their weaker points, so they've been working on that really hard, and it looks like it's paid off, to be honest. It's quite an aggressive body they've got on the car, which means it's packaged quite tightly, and it was very reliable. That's always a good sign when dealing with a changed engine, essentially. So, good news for them. Another team who has also changed their engine packaging is Mclaren. They had a strong showing as well. And of course, with their engine, they kind of just bolted it in the back last season, because last season they switched over to Mercedes engines from Renault engines, but they weren't really allowed to develop the car too much around that engine because we had that token system and McLaren had to use all of their tokens just to fit the engine in the car. There wasn't a lot of customization McLaren could do to that car to fit the engine properly. This season's different though. They've still with that Mercedes engine, which they know pretty well, and now they can actually customize the car, the bodywork, everything about it to fit that engine. So hopefully that will see them a bit faster in that regard. We also saw them go quite well regarding the porpoising as well. The porpoising effect is when the teams looked like they were bouncing on the straights, and it's basically where the air is getting pulled under the car. It pulls it down at the rear, and then the rear stalls, and it comes back up, and it's kind of like this bouncing effect. Very noticeable on the Ferraris. However, I believe the Alfa Romeos actually had the worst of it. But McLaren were actually very strong in that area. There's a brilliant technical video by the race which actually showed why this was the case. And they actually controlling the air down the sides of the car that almost sealed the airflow under the car. so that they didn't porpoise as much as the other teams, which is very interesting. And maybe they're onto something there that will give them an advantage. It was very interesting to see. Away from the track, we got slightly confusing feedback from the two drivers. On the one hand, we had Norris saying they didn't get everything they wanted to get done, and they left some stuff out of the plan, which I guess is pretty normal. You probably plan for more stuff than you can actually achieve, just so that you got some extras, some stretch goals if you want to hit them right. But then when it got round to Ricciardo, he was like, great test, brilliant. So you had Norris that was a little bit down on it, and Ricciardo that was very high on it, so it was very confusing. But overall, from outside looking in, looked pretty good for McLaren. Mercedes were another team that were very reliable out there, and they were fast on the last day as well. They managed to get 1 and 2 in the time chart with Hamilton and Russell. If you remember back to last season, they had a terrible test. This was much better for them. It was kind of like a solid middle-of-the-road test, really. There was nothing outstanding. Obviously, we expect a lot from Mercedes these days, and there was nothing outstanding there. But there again, they were reliable, they were quick, so what more can you ask for, really? Red Bull were also up there right behind Mercedes at 3 and 4 on the timesheets, the overall timesheets, but again, we don't know what that means, really. They did have one issue, however, they were still up there in the lap count, so, fine, really. The biggest talking point about that car is the aggressive-looking bodywork. So while most teams have gone for funneling air into the Coke bottle area at the back of the car, Red Bull seem to have taken it to the nth degree, whereas the side panels of their car are so sculpted and so shallow that you're actually, when you look at it side on, more or less half of the car is like floor, and then the top half is the actual side paneling itself. It's a crazy look. I think it detracts from their livery a little bit, but of course they won't mind that if they come in and win the championship based off it, right? Alpine came into the test having some issues, and they didn't run a DRS test, and apparently they were on very heavy on fuel the entire time. It felt like a bad test looking from the outside in for Alpine. They did have a few issues, which they managed to resolve quite quickly, in fairness. Not running that DRS meant that they were slow in the speed traps as well, and then running heavy on fuel the entire time meant maybe they're sandbagging, but maybe they're not. We'll have to wait to see. The drivers seem content with the running, so maybe I'm just reading too much into it there, but it'd be great to see them out on track again, I think, doing a few faster tests. AlphaTauri looked good out there again. They're usually quite steady in testing, like middle of the road. You know how it goes with AlphaTauri these days. They did have a crash that derailed their final day, so I'm not sure what kind of running they missed out on there. But over the course of the 3 days, very steady, quite reliable, just getting it done, which is what you want to see from these tests, right? Aston Martin were another one of those teams that was just very steady, very reliable, just banging in the lap counts, getting all the data they need, and just coming away generally pretty positive about the whole test. It's good to see from Aston, especially because they have their sights set on that, championship level fight over the next couple of years, and they had a disappointing season last season, so they need to build that back up, and hopefully this is the start of that for them. Alfa Romeo were one of the teams that had multiple issues and relatively few laps across the 3 days. Bottas was actually the lowest of all the drivers. That's a huge problem for them, as they seem to have taken a big step forward in the manufacturing their car. Not only have they taken this new Ferrari power unit, but they've also developed their car quite aggressively. Not as aggressively as Red Bull, but it's getting up there. So they might have found something that might leapfrog them up the standings, but we couldn't tell because they had so many issues, which is such a shame because they'd stopped development early last season in order to focus on this car. So you don't expect them to have so many issues if they've been looking at it longer than everyone else. Another team which ran into that exact same problem was Haas. They had a low lap count and so many issues with their car. Again, because they didn't even develop last season's car at all. They wanted to focus on this season's car. So you don't expect this many issues with a car that's been developed probably longer than anybody else's. It's such a shame. And again, Haas are one of these teams where it's like, you've put time into your car. We can see it. we can see that you might be onto something here, but because there were so few laps, we don't know if it's actually going to improve against what they had last year, especially considering the competition seems to have moved on as well. Williams were very steady and unspectacular, again moving into that like Aston Martin, AlphaTauri kind of just getting on with the work, getting the testing done. Great to see Albon back in the car for sure. I'm still like, every time I see them, I'm like, do I like that livery? Do I not like that livery? So that's the kind of place I'm in right now when I see that car. But it was good just to see them out there, getting the work done. Obviously, the last couple years, they've been struggling. They do struggle to attend these tests and to get their work done. So it's great to see them out nice and early, getting the work done, and most importantly, getting it done without issue as well. So good on them. Overall, I think all of the engine manufacturers had made significant changes to the engines. Obviously, Renault in the Alpine, they've packaged that more tightly now. Red Bull have taken the older Honda engine, badged it themselves, and are working on that internally as well. We've already talked about Ferrari and the Mercedes. So basically, all of these teams are working with like new engine configurations here. So I was really pleased overall to see a lack of engine reliability issues. They'll probably like turning them way down and not pushing them as hard as they can, and etc., etc. But it's still very positive to see, considering, in years gone by, they used to just blow up after one race sort of thing. Now we're going through these tests where they're banging out 140 odd laps without issue is brilliant to see. One of the issues we did see, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, was the porpoising, the bouncing up and down. This did damage some cars. Like I think Alfa Romeo did come off worse, where they actually had to replace parts in their car because the porpoising damaged parts of their car. This is going to be really interesting development to see how teams get out of this, because in the short term, just for the test, we saw teams digging holes in their floors for the air to escape and adjusting the ride height upwards so that the car didn't dip down as much. But of course, doing that affects the performance of the car. And sure, while the teams weren't too worried about performance at this test, they certainly will be when it comes to Bahrain. So they need to get a development in that fixes that. And that's why I think McLaren are in pole position here, because of the way they're controlling the airflow down the side of the car and really sealing that up and not having this porpoising problem means they don't have to work to fix the porpoising. They can work on making their car faster, whereas other teams just have to catch up to fixing the porpoising problem before they can make their car faster. So a slight advantage to McLaren there by the sounds of it. Very interesting times ahead. We did also hear from multiple reports about the cars being over the weight limit at this test. Red Bull in particular said it's a problem for them. I don't know if that's going to be a significant problem come race time, as that tends to be normal around the tests because the parts tend to be unfinished, made with heavier materials. There tends to be some sandbagging. You don't know how much fuel's gone into the car, that sort of thing. So yeah, the cars are very heavy, and they have been for a few years. They're only getting heavier, but I don't know if a weight limit problem is coming. I think we'd hear more about it if it was, because the teams would be putting their hands up to the FIA and saying, hey, there's no way we can make these cars light enough to race with the current weight limit. So I expect that not to be a problem for the first race in Bahrain, but it was something we heard a little bit about coming out of the first preseason test. Now, the second preseason test happens later this week from the 10th to the 12th in Bahrain. This will give us a much, much closer representative to what we're going to actually get at the race, because the race in Bahrain now is only 2 weeks away. And I imagine teams will be running pretty close to race setups at this second test, because let's face it, by the time they finish on the 12th, there's only less than a week to go before they have to get in race trim. So yeah, I don't know how much time you can really spend developing new parts, fly out to Bahrain, fit it on the car before they get going again in a few days' time sort of thing. So that'll be interesting to see. It'll be much better hopefully much better for the likes of Alpine and Haas and Alfa Romeo as well. moving on from the preseason testing, shall we talk about the Alfa livery reveal? That happened this week, and I was very, very happy to see it. I'd been holding off on my livery review video until they finally showed us this thing. So I was very happy to see that, so I could do that video. If you do want to check that video out, I do rank every team's livery, giving a score to the best and giving a score to the worst as well. That is up on the YouTube channel and out on the podcast platforms as well, if you want to check that out. But I will say this for the Alfa livery, it was strong. Very, very good. I like that livery a lot. It had this strong Alfa red on the nose, on the back. It was basically a big white cut through the car across the driver cockpit, but they left the red halo in. It was beautiful. It looks amazing. There was also like a really nice touch on the front wing where the end plates are white and the very tip of the nose is white. Just beautiful, beautiful two-tone car. Makes it look really good. Really nice kind of Alfa Italian flag on the back rear wing as well. Really, really good looking car. And over to the Team Andretti news. It's not really new news. We have talked about this previously. However, it refuses to go away. It keeps bubbling under the surface right now. Basically, if you haven't caught up to speed, Andretti Motorsport has announced their intention to join the F1 grid in 2024. They say they filed all of the paperwork with the FIA and F1 to get that underway. However, F1 has come out and said they are currently not accepting or reviewing new members. This does feel a bit strange because obviously we do have slots available on the grid. We've gone up to 12, 13, 14 teams maybe, and we're currently at 10. So it feels like there is space available, and the Andretti team are a massive, massive motorsport powerhouse over in the US, competing in IndyCar. And of course, they have the F1 pedigree with Andretti himself. So they absolutely can do this. And just to kind of show that they're, real about it, that they can flex a little bit, they said that they have the 200 million, which is required to enter the grid, available. It's good to go. They can do it right now. They can put that money down. And they've also got a engine partnership, which I've heard rumors that's with Renault. Makes a lot of sense that, they say, if we entered tomorrow, we would be ready to go tomorrow. So they think they're ready to go, and why not? I mean, like, F1's saying it's not accepting or reviewing new members. Love to hear why that is the case, considering the teams literally just agreed a new Concord agreement with the owners of F1 to spread the prize money more fairly across the teams and basically create an environment which is conducive to allowing new members to join and thrive. One of the big problems in the past has been new teams joining, such as, Virgin, Marussia, or whatever you want to call them, HRT, Caterham, and the like. When they joined, they were not very well funded, so they came last, but basically got no money at all from F1 for finishing last. So they just went away because there's no way to sustain that. Whereas now the prize money is, diluted down far enough that you'd hope there is the ability to sustain these smaller teams. Not saying Andretti's small at all. This is just a general point, because Andretti would actually be probably one of the bigger teams in F1 if they were allowed in. And perhaps maybe that's why they're not allowed in, because it would upset the apple cart of, the Mercedes, the Ferraris, the Red Bulls being at the top. Maybe they're afraid of a little competition, eh? But anyway, that news story's been going on for a little while now. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, because Andretti do seem to be on a big, PR marketing push to be like, hey, we want to join, let us in. And F1's made their statement. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes, honestly. In other news, there has been more fallout from the Ukraine-Russian war affecting F1. So F1 has now torn up the contract regarding Russian races in general. So we had heard previously that they'd cancelled Sochi this year, which would have been our last race at Sochi anyway. They cancelled that race. They've now gone one step further and said all Russian races in the future are cancelled as well. So this new track we were going to be at in Russia gone, not racing there anymore. And they said that is going to be forever. We are no longer racing in Russia. So fair play to them on that. That's a big stance. That's a good stance. And we are done with Russia. So the question becomes, where can we go? F1 has been very good the last couple of years of organising replacement races. Obviously, with the whole COVID thing, they got very good at scrambling last minute to find races to replace ones that had to drop out. So I have full confidence in them finding a replacement for Sochi this year and easily going forward. But the big question is, where will it be? Will it be at fan favourite Turkey? Will it be back at Portimao again? I also did see the Sepang circuit in Malaysia do a little cheeky tweet. So maybe we'll head back there. It's very exciting to think about where we could go with that. So looking forward to seeing what F1 comes up with there. Another fallout from the Ukraine-Russia war is that Haas have now officially dropped Uralkali and also Nikita Mazepin as a result. Now, we did think this news was coming because obviously that war broke out whilst teams were at the first test, and Haas almost instantly started scraping off any Uralkali branding from their car and ran a plain white livery. However, at the time, Mazepin was in the car and he stayed in the car for the entire test, but of course, it's his dad's company, it's his dad's money. We all know why he was in that car. So speculation became rife about his position in the team as soon as that happened. I imagine Haas didn't officially announce anything right then and there because they had to get all their legal ducks in a row, as it were. But it seems like they've done that now because they released a statement that officially said they've dropped the company and they've dropped the driver. It's a big statement from Haas. Obviously, that sponsorship probably kept them afloat last year and would have obviously contributed quite heavily to this year's budget as well. So fair play to them for taking this stand. Really, really good to see. And also the stand on Mazepin as well. I mean, that is a big statement because that's basically saying if you didn't bring in money, you're not good enough to drive an F1. So a bit of a harsh slap down for him, but fair play. Haas now get to move on. So what is going to be their primary sponsor now is a big question. And who is going to be their other driver? So speculation, again, rife here. Not so much for the sponsor. Don't know who that's going to be. Don't know what their car's going to look like as well. In the livery video that I said about earlier for the Alfa, I did say, I don't know what Haas are going to turn up to the first race with as their livery. Obviously, it won't be the Uralkali livery. I said it probably won't be the plain white livery. I imagine they're now scrambling to go find a sponsor and they'll just paint it whatever colour they want, right? So, interesting times ahead for them regarding their car look and interesting times ahead for who's going to be in that car. Obviously, Mick Schumacher going to be there, but who is going to replace Mazepin? Frontrunner at the moment is Pietro Fittipaldi, the reserve driver for Haas. Obviously, he's just an easy one to plug in right now. He does have some race experience for taking over for Romain Grosjean when his accident happened a few years ago. But of course, we don't like the easy option, do we? We always love to speculate. So I've seen interesting names out there. I've seen Nico Hulkenberg, obviously the reserve driver for Aston Martin. Interesting one. I mean, I love Hulkenberg and I'd love to see him on the grid again. But he's contracted to Aston Martin, so Aston Martin would have to agree to let him go to do that. Would they? I mean, that'd be an interesting negotiation to see, right? Another name I've seen out there is Oscar Piestri, which actually makes a lot of sense. He's the F2 champion and he doesn't currently have a F1 seat. He is the Alpine reserve, so again, Alpine would have to agree to it, but I think they'd be much more okay with agreeing to it because it's getting their F2 champion some F1 experience. So, you know, potentially a good option for them there. But would Haas enjoy that though? I mean, they just went through a season where they had 2 rookies and now bringing in another rookie to partner a guy who's only in his 2nd season. It would feel like this season would be another team building exercise for them rather than a proper go at it. So I don't know if they want to go down that route. And another name I've seen is Antonio Giovannazi, which, hey, now there is a good name to have. Obviously, he was the Alfa Romeo driver for the last couple seasons, pushed out this season for Guan Yu Zhou. He's now racing in Formula E, so again, commitments that have already been made, which might need to be negotiated out of. But he's got tons of F1 experience, fairly quick on his day, a little bit inconsistent, but running in a Haas, that could go pretty well for him. And it could put him back in the shop window for another F1 seat, which, at the moment, he's unlikely to get, right? So Haas do have some really good options at the end of the day. And of course, there's still the full F2 field they could pull from. I'm sure they could find somebody with tons of money if they want to keep going down that route in the F2 field. But there's tons of names available to them, but are they going to be able to get them at such short notice? That's the real question. With the test happening this week, it's going to have to happen really quickly, unless they just put Mick Schumacher in that car for the entire second test and then get something sorted before the Bahrain race. But ideally, you'd like your driver in the car in the test, right? Just to get some mileage behind them, try them out, that kind of thing. It's going to be an interesting time for Haas. They have to work really quickly, and there's a lot of work to be done. So I don't envy them, and I'm looking forward to see what they produce. And just to end things on a high note, we do have the news of Max Verstappen getting a new contract till 2028. That's fantastic news for our world champion. That's really great stuff. I did do a news piece on this on the channel as well if you want to check that out. But basically, the news is he is now being paid reportedly the same as Hamilton. I think it's around 30 to 40 million euros a season. And up until 2028, which is a huge, huge contract. 6 years. When I thought about what I'd be doing in 2028, it kind of boggled my mind. I have no idea. So the fact that he's committed to Red Bull for that long, clearly he feels that is his family, that is his place. And Red Bull, they're locking down one of the best drivers on the grid for his best year. So makes sense from both sides. One thing I did mention in the news video is that we did not hear about any get-out clauses. Because obviously 2028 is a long time. And that's not just going through this new regulation of changes to the car, but it's also going through the changes to the engine as well in 2026. So 2 massive regulations changes. Will Red Bull be competitive through both of them? So that's an interesting question. So I do wonder if Max has any get-out clauses in his contract. Say, for instance, if Red Bull fall to the back of the grid for whatever reason, for, their cars too aggressively designed doesn't work, or their engine doesn't work, or what have you, if they fall to the back of the grid, is he allowed to leave for a faster team further up the grid? It'll be interesting to figure that out. Obviously, we're not going to get told that if they don't want to tell us that. But overall, that's a bit of good news for Max. And came a little bit out of the blue because he was still contracted up until the end of 2023. So nobody was really speculating on his future at all. And it just happened. So obviously he's done well. He's leveraged his position as the world champion into a nice, handsome new contract. So well done to him. And that's it. I'm going to end the podcast there. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening and for watching. If you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like me to bring up in these podcasts, do please leave them in the comment section if you're on YouTube, or if you're listening via audio, you can hit me up at Race Report Pod on either Twitter or Instagram, and I'll include these in the show as well. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.